may be. This session is being recorded. We will send you a copy of the recording after the session, and that way you can then share that with your peers and colleagues and co-workers should that be required. So as I said, any additional questions or any questions you may have, please type them in the questions bar, and I shall now pass over to Donovan to run through the presentation for us this morning. Thanks, Donovan.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me. Let's have a quick yes for that, Mark.
Yep, can certainly hear you, Donovan.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, it's great to be here this morning and to be able to talk to you and introduce master clocks as they relate to the education sector. I'm hopeful that everyone out there has got a really great connection, that you can see and hear everything. Normally these presentations go really, really well, 95% of the time, but sometimes the internet will betray us, the sound will drop out a little bit, or maybe the video will drop out, and because there's so many people with different internet connections, no one will ever quite know why that happened. But if you have trouble with your technology today, I want you to reach out to Mark and the team. Very happy to run this presentation again later on if we had to for people, and as Mark's already said, we're recording it as well. So if you do have technical problems, if you're struggling, don't panic. There'll be a recording come out, and I'd love to do this session again for anybody who needs it. In terms of time palette master clocks, I first of all, I guess I want to be really upfront, clear, and honest. Master clocks are not a new concept. Master clocks have been around for a very long time. They're a mainstay, particularly in hospital facilities. But definitely in the education sector as well, we see them in schools. So we're not claiming to have invented the master clock, but we certainly, with Time Palette, have redeveloped the product from the ground up. Now, if you go out and have a look at other traditional master clock systems, and there's quite a few out there, what you're going to find is devices which are LED devices. So that is how they display the time via LED light. You're going to get a choice of either red, green, white, or perhaps blue. And you can't change them. You can't vary that. That's what they do. So in terms of developing Time Palette master clocks, we really wanted to build it from the ground up and give people who need a master clock the opportunity to choose a theme. Now, a color theme is really important. First of all, it ensures that people within your facility or people who are designing the facility, if they want a clock system which fits in with the decor, it looks like it's meant to be there, it's harmonious, then you can certainly do that. But even more importantly is it allows you to cater for people who are visually impaired, and if they have trouble seeing particular colors, etc., so on and so forth, then you're not locked in to one color in the foreground and the background. So that's something that we introduced, which is not done by any other master clock that you can buy on the market today. You can choose your frame as well. You can see on the three here that I've got up in front of you, these are our black and white offerings, but we have requests to do wood grain finishes and things like that. And really, you're only limited by your imagination. With enough notice, we can do a frame in any way that people want it. So again, this is about ensuring that this is a part of the facility. It feels like it's part of the building. The clock face is really important. If you go and explore the master clock market, the other thing you're going to find is that you have to choose between having a digital clock face, as in what's on the far right-hand side there, or an analog clock face, which is what's in the middle there. With Time Palette, with every single one of the devices, you can choose what your clock face is going to be, and you can change it anytime you want. It's not locked in forever. As you see on the far left-hand side there, Time Palette master clocks can also show both an analog clock face and also a digital clock face. So flexibility in the clock face with the information we can display. Different things are going to suit different people. If you've wrote down the question there for the clock which is showing the day of the week and the month, for example, on the left there, can that display in a different language? Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got somebody, I don't know, if you've got a school and there's a French class being run, the teacher might decide that on their clock they would like the day of the week in the French class to show in the French language. So We've got great flexibility with the clock face. You're not going to get that with your traditional master clock. The other advantage that we have with Time Palette, the point of difference, is size. We can start from quite a small unit, and you see behind me here, I've got one of our 10-inch units. That's a unit which is going to go into a small meeting room, perhaps a small staff room. If I was and I understand that we're talking about education today, but if I was popping these into hospitals, that's a unit that I'd put into a patient's bedroom. So it's sized for the room. But whether you need to put a clock into a small room, into a staff room, into a classroom, or a basketball stadium, Time Palette can scale to whatever size that room needs to ensure that people can read the time at a glance. So those are the 4 points of difference. And in order to achieve those things, we built Time Palette from the ground up on a modern IP-based digital platform. This is not like the traditional master clocks, which are clocks and nothing more. We've got a very flexible product. A little bit more about the product, and then we'll get into some user scenarios. So we introduced Time Palette to the market in 2018, and when I mean we introduced it, that's when we did our first installations. So we've got units out there which are running really well and have been for some time. The development of the product before that, there was another 2 years, and some things you can't accelerate in terms of testing and development and checking that they'll work. And one thing that is almost impossible to speed up is time. So this is a product which we developed to make sure that it would cope with changes in years, changes in daylight savings, changes in all those things that occur over a period of time. And you've got to really do that R&D in the background and be confident that when you put a product out like this for many, many years to come, it's going to do the right thing. We're different by design, and that's what I alluded to in the last slide there. So this is a product which we don't want to reproduce master clocks and sell another master clock. We've gone out of our way to solve the old problems that a master clock solved, but in a much better way. 100% of the development was done here in Australia. We own the product outright in Australia, and we support it in Australia. This is not a product that we are reselling from a supplier overseas. This is a product where the people who know it, the people who developed it, the people who sell it are here in Australia. We're available, and we're always going to be here. We've recognised, as I alluded before, the requirements of people with accessibility needs. People with visual impairments is the obvious one. So whether it's somebody who simply has trouble seeing quite a small clock, and therefore they might be better suited to, you can see behind me, that's quite a large one. That's a 21.5-inch frame. And again, people who struggle with colour blindness, you're going to be able to cater to doing foregrounds and backgrounds that really suit those people better. And it's really important to recognise, the needs of those people, as with everyone else. And the last part of my slide there, which is a little bit ambiguous, but I've talked about supporting new challenges and integrating aspirational technology. What I mean by that is, as we develop facilities, particularly new ones, and even some brownfield facilities, are now introducing technology such as real-time location services, time and attendance systems, and any number of different IoT devices, as we like to call them, which are going to appear in the classroom. Sometimes the number one challenge to getting those systems implemented and working is they simply need a power source, and getting electricians in to run new power throughout an entire building to host a small IoT device can be something which, is the difference between being the budget working or not working. So Time Palette supports new technologies. We've got USB ports that we've left spare on the device so that we can power out other IoT devices. We've got a platform, a modern IP platform. So if you've got a system which you need a host operating system to run on in that environment, then Time Palette is all about working with and being harmonious with those other systems so that we're making the best use of our technology and of our investment. In terms of education and what master clocks are used for, I'm going to very quickly jump to a video. It runs for around about 30 seconds. This can be the time in these presentations when it drops out a bit when we're streaming, but we'll be back. If you do find it's a bit jittery, there's 30 seconds and we'll be straight back onto this presentation. 1 second.
I didn't really like it to start off with, but it's now normal and it's just a normal thing to do every day to just put in your locker.
I think I had a bit of muscular atrophy on my right arm because we weren't doing anything with them, but yeah, it went away after a while. I got used to it.
My friends now felt like they wouldn't ignore me on their phones, but they would still go on their phones and it wouldn't be as good of a conversation. But now no one's on their phone, so better. Yeah.
After a while, you realize it's something like there's a reason for it. You get used to it, and then you'll be like, "Oh, it makes sense why we're doing this."
So what those students are really getting at there is in May this year, it was announced in Victoria that mobile phones would be banned in schools. And while that might seem like a strange way to take this conversation, we're living in a world where less and less people are wearing watches, and that's not by accident. That's because everybody is carrying mobile phones, and it's how we've come to quickly refer to the time. So I guess we're looking at a future where in schools we know that our kids these days, they're pretty much born when they come out with an iPhone in their hand, and that in schools is something which we're really seeing a trend to phase that out. And at the same time, of course, it's no more appropriate for teachers to be pulling their phone out of their pocket in class and referring to them. So master clocks give students and staff at a glance reference to what is the time, but also the day and the date. So it's about filling a need there to keep people on the track. We can also provide...
Just to add to that, I have in my family, my wife is actually a teacher, and I have two sisters that are teachers, and I have 3 children that are school age. My 3 kids at the school that my kids and my wife, my wife teaches at my kids' school. They made a decision that they were going to ban phones from their classrooms as well, very similar to what we've seen in Victoria. And one of the pain points that my wife has come across is the teachers continuously asking her what the time is, because they've been so used to having their phones, as Donovan's saying, they're used to referencing their phones in relation to looking at the time. As I mentioned, I have 3 children. One of them has a watch, the other 2 don't. So in a classroom scenario, the kids are constantly asking my wife, "Hey, miss, what's the time?" And literally, this is one of the reasons why when I first saw what Donovan was doing and the team at Time Palette were doing in relation to developing these clocks, I saw the value and the importance of using this technology in the education sector. So sorry, I just wanted to reference a personal reference in that.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, you're dead right, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into that shortly, because we do talk about lesson planning for teachers, and one of the fundamentals to that is understanding the amount of time that you've got to get a certain amount of information and content and teaching in. So in addition to that, because we've got a digital device here which is time-based, of course we can provide count up and count down timers, and they're really important both for exam periods and also for sport events and things like that. The other great thing with having a master clock is that you can use it as the trigger for other related systems. The obvious one within a school is ringing the school bell, and in a perfect world, the school bell, if it's due to ring at 1:15 p.m, then the time shown on the clock in the classroom at the time it rang would also be 1:15 p.m. So we're just talking about taking out the uncertainty, the ambiguity that might exist there around what the time really is. So in terms of clocks, there's nothing to stop us putting up any number of clocks on any number of walls, but Time Palette, one of the keys to it is it's a synchronized clock system. And so, as I was alluding before, we're talking about keeping very large groups of people to a strict schedule. Okay, we want everyone to be looking at the same time. And while it might seem that being out by 1 or 2 minutes here and there wouldn't matter, you know, if you've got a whole class and that lesson is commenced and the teacher's underway, somebody arriving 1 minute late is a massive disruption. So we want to keep the entire education facility running to the same time. We don't want some clocks fast, some slow, and we definitely don't want some not working at all. It also allows us to handle events like daylight savings change automatically, and some states in Australia have to deal with that and some don't. And taking the doubt over whether or not we're really looking at the right time is just another reason to have a clock system that automatically synchronizes back to the right time, and no one has to worry about it. And the other great reason for a synchronized clock system is it significantly reduces maintenance, and we're going to get further into reducing maintenance in another slide. In terms of where you might put them, and I alluded to it earlier in the first slide when I talked about the flexibility of the size of the product, but the answers in terms of education, we're talking about classrooms, we're talking about transport interchanges, sports stadiums, exam halls, you know, playground and downtime areas, assembly halls, staff rooms, all the places where people gather, where we need to keep them on track and on time to ensure that they meet their goals for the day, that they're in the right place at the right time. There's really no limit in terms of the imagination of where we might put a master clock system. In terms of the critical nature of what we would call precision timing, you know, and there's been on time and there's been late, and then there's the need to be really careful with precision time. So particularly in the education sector, when we're talking about managing examinations and ensuring that people clearly understand how much time they've got left in an exam period, and making sure, again, somebody who's got, you know, some kind of a disability, you know, has equal access to that time as everyone else. Along those notes, another cute thing we can do with Time Palette is we can ask it to, at whatever increments we like, to read out the time audibly, so that if we had, you know, a classroom which specialised to catering to visually impaired students, then they could get the occasional update of what the time is audibly. So precision time is really important for different people for different reasons. The final point there is obviously somebody running late for the start of an exam can be, you know, extremely disruptive to a whole lot of other people sitting in the exam, but it can also be the difference between them being allowed to start the exam or not. So we want to make sure that the time is right, and that the people who are making the decisions around the timing of exams and around whether someone starts or stops, they need to have access to the right time. I've touched on this a couple of times, and now we really get into the serious part of reducing maintenance, time, and costs. Clocks consume three things. They're going to consume a source of power. They need to have a time source, whether you're manually adjusting the clock to make it right, or whether you've got a Time Palette master clock, which is fetching its time from a central master clock source. And then they also consume maintenance time. So master clocks remove the need to manage two consumables, which is never replacing a battery, ever, and never adjusting a clock that runs fast or slow, ever, and avoiding twice yearly, you know, getting up a ladder to adjust for daylight savings time. So, you know, if we start to think about schools and how many clocks we might have, you know, a typical school, it wouldn't be hard to find 50 locations, you know, where we might have a clock. By the time we've done, say, 30 classrooms, a couple of staff rooms, some offices, a sporting hall, an assembly area, a transport interchange, so on and so forth. Over a 5-year period, what we're talking about is 250 batteries, which we won't have to purchase, we won't have to climb up a ladder to install, and they won't end up in landfill either. And that also equals 750 times in this one reasonably small facility that someone hasn't had to climb a ladder. Now, working at heights in the workplace has become a serious matter. It's seriously dealt with whatever your sector you're in. You can't simply jump on a ladder. You've got to be able to manage the risk of climbing up. In most states now, anybody who climbs any distance up is required to be qualified to do it. And I mean, I'm qualified, so I've got a certification, of course, for being competent in working at heights, and that's a lot to manage, where your core deliverable is education. It's not maintenance, it's not climbing up ladders, so on and so forth. And again, while our sector that we're concentrating on today is the education sector, I guess it's a really great example if I quickly, move over to talking about the hospital sector. And it's not unusual for a hospital, for example, to have 500 rooms in it which need clocks. We're talking about a big hospital. Over a 5-year period, we would be talking about 2,500 batteries that we wouldn't need to purchase, we wouldn't need to install, and which wouldn't need to go to landfill. And that's 7,500 times someone hasn't had to manage the risk of climbing up a ladder. So reducing maintenance time and costs is a big reason to have a master clock system. It's not something to be underestimated. In terms of efficient delivery of lessons, and we touched on that area, the fact of the matter is teachers have got a set window to deliver a set amount of content, and we've already talked about the fact that we need to help them keep on track. Mobile phones aren't in classrooms anymore. It's really not appropriate for teachers to be pulling their phones out and continually referring to the time. They need to be able to see what the time is. They need to have a reference point to keep them on track. And the other thing is that teachers are increasingly sharing their lesson plans with their students. They're not a secret thing where they surprise them as they go along. And that helps keep students on track because they understand that there's a time allocation of 45 minutes per period or whatever it is, and they've got to get through the content in this time. If there's a 5-minute stretch at the end of each lesson where students have the opportunity to get up and do some reverse teaching and explain what they've learned today, then you've got to be able to manage that. So efficient delivery of lessons is really well supported by a master clock as well. So that's the introduction to master clocks. There's lots of great reasons to have master clocks, and I think there's lots of great reasons to look at time palette master clocks in terms of a new technology where we've rebuilt it from the ground up on a modern platform, and because of that, we think it's really suitable for the education sector. Mark, I might throw over to you, and if you wanted to manage some questions.
Sure. So we actually have quite a few questions. So let me just go through these one by one. First one was, is there a limit to the quantity of clocks that can be deployed throughout our school?
There is no practical limit whatsoever. Okay, so we have a master time reference. There's no limit to how many what we would call slave clocks that we can connect to that at all. So no.
Okay, great, thank you. The other question was, and I might actually answer this question myself if you're okay with it, was what's the value? You mentioned that you had, well, I'm going to just change the question a little bit. The question was, what's the value of having Bluetooth low energy in the clock? So I can answer that. What we're finding a lot of educational institutions are doing now or looking to do is to look to do time and attendance. One of the challenges that we've seen in education, and my company in technology has worked in the education sector for a very, very long time. One of the challenges that we've seen, one of the time-consuming challenges that we see in each classroom or each lesson is taking a roll. So we're seeing some of the more advanced schools now looking at how do we do time and attendance. In other words, a student has a tag that is attached to their bag or it's on their keyring or whatever it may be. When they come into the classroom, that tag will actually talk to the BLE beacon that's actually in the clock, and it will give the classroom or will give the school the indication that everybody who should be in that classroom is actually in that classroom. So it will associate the students in the class with that particular classroom lesson. So rather than having to go through a physical roll call, it's actually doing it automated, or it's an automated roll call. So that's the value that we see, the reason behind why the decision was to put BLE into clocks is because we're starting to see a lot of education institutions using BLE for that particular purpose. The other purpose behind the BLE piece is it actually allows you as you start bringing more assets and so forth into the organisation, it obviously allows you to tie in your systems into the BLE network as well. So, so a couple of other questions. You mentioned that the clocks can be any colour. Can they be coloured specifically to our corporate school brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So we colour with a full what we call an RGB colour palette. So if you've got a colour scheme that you can come up with, we can deliver it within these units. There's no problem matching a corporate identity, etc. And for the bulk of your clocks that you deploy, that's what you're going to do. And the great thing with these units is that if you've got that one classroom which has got that one person in it who has difficulty looking at your corporate colours, because of perhaps colour blindness, then we can change that one clock to suit them. So yes, is the short answer. We can cater to anything that's desired in terms of colour, logo, brand, etc.
Great. Another question was, what does it take to deploy the clocks? So I guess let me just expand on that. So what's required?
No worries. So essentially, most clocks are going to be deployed at around about 2.5 meters off the ground, so a little bit above head height. So it's going to need somebody who can get them installed on a ladder. In terms of the integration, we attach them to the wall with a very, very slimline plate. They protrude from the wall. Even the big ones are not more than 40 millimeters. So we've got to attach that to the wall. We then slot the clock in place and we connect the clock. The clock can be connected and how we recommend it via one network cable, and we use what's called power over Ethernet to give it its power, and that gives it its data connection. There's a configuration point where we say to that clock, when you go to fetch the time, then we want you to go and fetch it from this location. Generally, we would configure that in advance for the client, so that's part of supplying this product. So I'm not going to call them plug and play because there's a couple of little things we've got to do, but there's certainly nothing overly complex. And what we would generally do, particularly for a big deployment, is we'd meet with the client, we'd decide on a color scheme and a design that they really loved. We'd work with their IT team, we'd test it on the network wherever we were going to get the time source from, whatever we were going to integrate it with, we'd get all that working, so that when we come to deploy the units, it's reasonably quick and easy. It's really about attaching them to the wall and turning them on.
And we've got one more question. What is the availability?
As in the uptime, sorry? Or
So no, hang on, let me sorry, they're just typing. What is the availability of products? So how, if we were to order, how long does it take?
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Look, of course, it depends. It depends on the variables of the units, and there are a few variables, as I've mentioned, such as the frame color, the size. We can do power via traditional DC power. We can do power over Ethernet. So, because there's a few variables, we don't hold huge quantities of stocks in warehouses. It wouldn't make sense. We want our product to be flexible, and we don't want to force our customer to buy a product because that's what we've got in a warehouse. So we're normally looking for a small order. We're normally looking at within 1 to 2 weeks would be the absolute maximum. If somebody was to be seeking say 100 units, I'd be looking at a month because we'd be getting those manufactured specifically to suit that client and their requirements. So it's never going to be anything more than a month, and probably quicker than that. And that's for a very big order where we've done really specific customization to suit that client's needs. So little order, very quick. We've got stock in Australia straight away. Larger order, we'd plan that to make sure that we could fit in with the project.
Excellent. Thank you so much. There's no other questions that we have, so we are about on time. I just wanted to again thank you, Donovan, for making the time and being available for us this morning, and for those on the call. If you have any further questions, as we mentioned, we'll be sending you a copy of the recording. There'll be our details on there. Please feel free to get in contact with us. We do have partners that we work with right across Australia, so regardless as to whether you're in the Northern Territory, and I can see we've got about 4 or 5 schools in the NT, so welcome to those from the Northern Territory. We have people on the call right now from WA. So we have partners in your local region. We actually have a school over in New Zealand. So if you are in New Zealand, for that person who's on the call who is in New Zealand, we do have a partner in New Zealand who we can put you in touch with as well. They'll be able to assist you with your inquiries. So thank you all very much. Look forward to working with you around the Master Clocks products going forward. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Ryan.